Good morning. Welcome to our online gathering for Silverside Church. Glad you've joined us today. Let me remind you that we will continue these online video gatherings and not have face-to-face gatherings until September the 13th, when we will meet to celebrate the church's 185th anniversary. The actual birthday for the church is September the 5th. There will be an online celebration on the birthday itself with some reflections about the history of the church by two very long-time members. Sometime in the mix there will be a leaflet circulating with some written memories about the church as well. But the service, which will be our first time to reconvene since our efforts to meet during July, will be September the 13th at 10 a.m. already. Some wonderful music plans are being made, and I think it will be a great time to celebrate. We clearly will still be wearing masks and sitting in socially distanced pew areas, but nonetheless, we will not allow it to dampen our spirits. Speaking of getting together, be on the lookout for news about some exciting plans that our music committee is working on with reference to afternoon concerts, outdoor concerts, coming up in early fall. There has been a largely unnoticed by most, but radical movement over the last decade during which the spiritual fire has shifted from the more, let's say, stereotypically zealous types to more progressive Christians. And that reality has the potential to change both the political and spiritual landscape in the United States. I had a feeling this was happening, but was shocked during the last many months to note the extent to which the more progressive Christian leaders are speaking out and getting a hearing in their efforts to impact the public square. Someone has said a worldly lifestyle seeking pleasure, wealth, fame, and material comforts will inevitably distract one from pursuing any spiritual purpose. Hence, the aspirant must separate herself or himself from the world or maintain some detachment from it. Separation from the world can be achieved either by physical isolation in a monastic community or by living an outwardly ordinary life, yet without attachment to its prevailing values. Gracious God, we give thanks today, especially for those people, those whom we know personally, those whom we know historically, who intriguingly are standouts. Not standouts in the way of being famous or prominent for the usual reasons, but standouts because they stand out like oddballs or sore thumbs. because they refuse to fit in with the status quo, because they refuse to let themselves ever be caught up in the flow of things created by the decisions and the movements of the masses. We are wondering today if the chatter coming out of Israel about the delay to annex areas impacting Palestinians is simply a political move, or if there's some real humanity finally involved. In the meantime, we continue to pray for those much maligned Palestinian people. Not only for those trying to continue to live in or near their homeland, but for the countless numbers of Palestinians trying to get by in refugee camps, as horrible as it was before the pandemic, now so much worse. Amen. There's a saying from Taoism: the sage patterns herself or himself on heaven, prizes the truth, and does not allow self to be cramped by the vulgar. The stupid person does the opposite of this. She or he is unable to pattern self on heaven, and instead frets over human concerns. She or he does not know enough to prize the truth, but instead, plodding along with the crowd, allows self to be changed by vulgar ways, and so is never content. Change is probably going to come, don't you think? Probably going to come about, however hard some may fight against it. There is, in fact, a female of color on one of the two major parties' vice presidential tickets. I won't mention which one. Wow. Well, change comes though so many fight against it. We want to be on the side of what is changing for the good, for the right. And yet, even in a democracy, there's tremendous pressure to conform in a multitude of key ways. The proper expressions of patriotism, for example, are rather prescribed by the Patriotic Expressions Approval Committees. You know who they are. If you're a patriot, you must never question the perspectives or the demands of a president who prays every day. And if you sense that you must speak out against something tearing the nation apart, such as the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots, there are those who still will ostracize you and call you un-American and unchristian. People who are willing to live by the lure of selfless morality will typically look like oddballs and misfits, and not like the status quo keepers. If we always find ourselves on the side of the majority, and if we've trained ourselves never to pay attention when something within us presses us to buck the system, never to see or speak out against the wrong we know exists, never to call injustice what it is in and outside the church, never to demand institutional renewal, then, like it or not, we are card-carrying members of the society of the status quo. How quaint. Quaint, quaint, quaint. Quaint is finally displayed on mantels or in museums or in oversized coffee table books with dust on them.